I was pretty worried that Chris Johnson was going to talk so long I wouldn't have any time for my 65 slides, but I'm actually given extra time. I'm confident that last year when I was here I must have knocked a home run because Agri-Northwest didn't have to help sponsor the event this year in order to get me on the program. Last year, Rand Wortman gave the health care update, and I thought he was pretty negative, and I may have even said something about him needing to get back on the Prozac a little better, but I need to apologize to him because everything he said was absolutely true. And a couple of months after I was here, I actually had a little experience with the healthcare system in that I had this kidney stone that I attempted to pass unsuccessfully. After all of the process that you go through to finally decide that you're going to have to surgically remove that, I went in and had surgery. I was in the recovery room and not feeling well, although that morphine-based drug was helping. And after they gave me that, they said, now, as soon as as this medicine kicks in, you can get dressed so you can go home. So I could see that, you know, in the brave new world, we're going to cut costs if we're going to send me home right after I was quite certain I was going to die. And I've learned a couple of more things this year. I want to talk to you about airline math for just a second, if you will. I fly a fair amount on Delta Airlines. I'm normally a platinum medallion flyer, which means I fly 75,000 miles a year with them. And if you get up to that level, you get upgraded quite a bit. And if you're 6'5" tall, that's really an excellent thing. But in December, I had one trip left to take in the year. I needed to fly to Sacramento from Salt Lake City. And when I finished that trip, I just needed to fly out in the morning, have a meeting, fly back, and I got out my little calculator and calculated I was going to miss Platinum Medallion by 250 miles. And at Gold Medallion, you don't get upgraded very often, really. So I said, well, I can't really make up a trip in order to go again just to get this status, so what am I going to do? What are my options? And so this is what I figured out. I said, okay, this ticket to Sacramento and back is going to cost $665. Now, what if I decided the day before that trip, I'd take the day off, and I fly to Denver, where I see my grandkids, and I take my son and daughter-in-law to see an excellent Daughtry Three Doors Down concert, two fine southern rock bands, fly back to Salt Lake the next morning, get on the same plane to Sacramento, have my meeting, and fly back on the same flight home. What will that do to the cost of the ticket? Because this will make Platinum Medallion for me if I do this. Cost of the ticket went down 90 bucks. So I think that's excellent math, and so I saw a very excellent concert and made Platinum Medallion and got upgraded on the way up here. And then finally, before I actually talk about agribusiness here for a few minutes, this year I came to this conclusion. We all like to be around extraordinary people. We love all the ideas they generate. We just like to be around them, and then we wonder why they don't act more ordinary. I haven't quite figured that out, but I do appreciate whenever I get an opportunity to be around extraordinary people. Unfortunately for you, this isn't your day if you were expecting it to be me. I will talk a little bit about what I think is going on in agriculture, and because I'm not up here as much, but I do travel around a little bit, you may get a little bit more of a national and international perspective, although I will talk some things about Washington agriculture. I show these charts every year, and I'm sure you don't remember them from year to year, and the only important thing to remember is where the little line is moving over on the right-hand side of the graph, which shows that they're projecting here on the 1st of September, just before corn harvest starts, that we'll only have a 5% carryover from the previous year crop. 5% times 52 weeks is about a 2.5 week supply of corn by the time we start harvest. That means there'll be shortages in some places in the United States, and it also means price of corn is going to be high, okay? And it is. you'll see that the world inventory isn't quite that tight, and that's coming on a little bit because Brazil is producing more corn than it has historically. We actually have a farm in Brazil. One of the challenges that you have down there is you can produce corn, but it's 1,000 miles to port on a two-way road where the pace is set by the slowest and most poorly conditioned truck on the road. And because it's two-lane traffic, there's no chance to pass. And then when you get to port, there's only about a 2-mile line to unload, and so it didn't matter how slow the road was anyway. So there are some challenges there, but they are putting more product on the world market. If you look at what the situation is with wheat, you'd look at the U.S. wheat supply and you'd say, oh, we got a 30% carryout, and that seems to be a pretty good number. That's kind of historical, actually a little bit high. But I think we'll show you some things that probably cause you to question what situation we're really like there. And you'll notice that the world wheat inventory is also in pretty good shape, so it's not as high. What effect that has is, and I showed some of this graph a year ago, is that if you compared food prices now worldwide to where they were back in 2002 through 2004, they're more than double. And that number was higher a year ago. It's come off a little bit. But this number has a great deal to do with how stable governments are in the world. And a lot of times what we get sold to as people's love for freedom is their love for actually eating and being able to afford to feed their families. And that number is still perilously high in terms of having government instability in third world countries. This is just a different presentation of it, and you can see that 2011 did tail off a little bit toward the end. And 2012, although that line's a little funny, and if you're not careful, you'll follow the wrong line. But food prices were fairly stable in 2012, but they're still high. Now, this is how you get 65 slides. I'm going to show you week by week what happened. Maybe I am. I thought we had shut the animation off on this slide. I'm going to show you how the drought developed in the American Midwest this last year. Okay? So this thing's running. You can see this was a South Texas drought at the time. By March, it's beginning to disappear, and in the Corn Belt, things are really good, and they plant this crop really fast with a lot of acres and project record yields per acre. By the 1st of June, this estimate of this crop is so big, corn's down to just over $5. A month later in July, right there, it was up to $7. And by August, it's up to $8.50. Okay? Now you'll see that that drought's receding, but unfortunately the crop's already grown. And so we get to the end of the year. How is that for 50 slides, Chris? And you said I couldn't do that in 2 minutes. Okay? But we're right here as of a couple of weeks ago. The Corn Belt, the I states, as we lovingly refer to them, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, are in okay condition. They're a little dry, but okay. The western part of the Midwest is still in a deep drought. If you move into that part of the Midwest, this really becomes a wheat drought and a cattle drought, because this is where a lot of the cattle that we eat as beef get fattened. And so we're in a situation where cattle ranches have had to depopulate, so they've shipped their calves early. They've even sold some of their cows, which probably temporarily held meat prices down a little bit, although you may not have noticed such a phenomenon. It may seem very high to you. But probably what it bodes for us is that we've got a couple of years ahead, because they can't rebuild that inventory in a day, because you have to raise a calf back up and you have to get a calf, you have to get a calf from her. So this is going to take a little while. So I think you're probably going to look at high beef prices for a couple of years now. All right. The other thing I think that this probably means is that you're going to have high beef prices, and corn is still high. We talked about that. And so, and then the other thing that's happening, we all are really glad that interest rates are low, but the government is particularly glad Because if we had interest rates that were even a couple of percent higher, can you imagine what the deficits would look like then if they were actually paying, any amount of interest to speak of? And so effectively, what you do, and I love the terminology that they have for this, is what do they call it? Monetary easing, where you expand the money supply and you devalue all the dollars that are out there. So, that's what we're going through, and the effect that that has on agriculture, as we enter this year, somebody's messed with me. How is that for quick? The effect that that has is that it has made our products very competitive in world markets. And countries that hold a lot of dollars, like China, are buying U.S. food products in large quantities. And so there is a lot of export going on to Asia right now, Asia and India. And for those of you that love almonds at the wholesale level, almonds are above $3 a pound now. Walnuts are above $4 a pound. Pistachios are high. And the Asians have a great appetite for those products, and so they're pulling them. They're buying them in great quantity, and they're a relative value in their own currency because the dollar is devalued. And so there's a big pull on those things. So agriculture is actually doing fairly well right now at a time when the rest of the economy may be struggling a little bit, which is not, that's not outside the theory that owning agricultural land is a hedge against inflation, because land has a tendency to hold its value because, prices of food will go up because there will be international demand for it. In the years since we created the mandate that said 40% of the American corn crop will be used for ethanol, everybody, you can relax a little bit. The subsidy on that went away, which was about 50 cents a gallon on the fuel, which was costing the government about $7.5 billion a year. They allowed that subsidy to expire, but the mandate is still there, so the created demand is still there, which does keep the price of corn higher. Incidentally, in the mid-'80s, we had a tendency to grow about 75 to 80 million acres of corn in the United States and a similar amount of soybeans. And in the ensuing 25 years, we've expanded that by about 20 million acres. And I just show you this, portrayal here to indicate that the way we expanded corn acreage was not in the traditional corn belt, but we moved west. And we started growing corn in the Dakotas and more corn in Nebraska and Kansas. And the trick there is it doesn't rain as much. So it becomes a riskier crop. And so if you look at what that does to trend line yields, which have had a tendency to be going up as you move on to more and more marginal acreage, it slows down how trend line yields increase. And then when you really get out there, there's some irrigation in western Nebraska and Kansas and down through Oklahoma into Texas. But that's the great Ogallala Aquifer, which has been for the last 50 years pumped a lot harder than it can recharge at. And so it really doesn't allow us to grow a lot more corn, because corn takes 30 to 35 inches of water to grow a corn crop. And they're finding that sustainable yields out of that aquifer look like it's more like 15 to 18 inches a year. So the acreage is up, the price is up, we're growing in some more marginal areas. If you watched those slides and weren't distracted by what was going on in the Midwest, you'll notice that Washington had a very fine, very normal weather year, while the Midwest was having a real problem. And so it was really an outstanding year for Washington agriculture last year again. And like I said, prices are pretty high. I think you're seeing that in the supermarket. But I don't think it's going to change in the near term. Now, there are expectations that this year's corn crop will be planted on 98 million acres. And if that happens, and if we have normal weather, then you'll see it come down substantially. It will probably come down to $4.50. Now, for years and years and years, when corn was subsidized, it sold for $2. And we've stepped up several times, and so now we're saying, wow, that'd be a lot of relief if we could get it down to $4.50. Right now, it's over $7. So that's pretty expensive. So, and what that does to all of your food supply is this. Any place in the country where they can grow corn as an alternative crop, but they're growing something that you eat, they have to pay more to get you to grow that crop, or you'll just grow corn. Okay? So, like I said, that moves everything with the price of corn. That moves a whole bunch of commodities with the price of corn. So we're all affected by it. So I'd like to tell you this is a horrible thing, but I do remember what business I'm in. So, but you can expect that the agricultural community here will be relatively strong for a while. I don't think, I think as these countries emerge, as their economies grow, one of the first things they do is upgrade the quality of the food that they're eating. And so there continues to be an expanding market for food products. And I think the agribusiness segment of your economy up here is going to be healthy for the next several years. Thanks for letting me come back. It's always good to come home.